We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. 147 days ago, the Minister was sworn into her portfolio, and yet she still self-identifies as a new Minister. Being new is no excuse. Australians dialling 000 in an emergency cannot wait for you to learn. The Minister isn't across her brief, and by her own admission, people have died. Given the magnitude of the 000 crisis, does the Minister regret her decision to prioritise a trip to New York over dealing with these urgent matters in Australia?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for her question. We can all agree that the outages that occurred last month by Optus are completely unacceptable. Optus's failings are under multiple investigations, including by ACMA, the independent regulator, and by state authorities. No one should be under any illusion this outage was the fault of Optus and Optus alone, and they will be held accountable. However, Optus's repeated failures have made one thing very clear. The 000 system needs reform, and that's exactly what our government is delivering. Yeah. Today we've announced 6 key points that we are prioritising to make 000 the most resilient and the most safe system that it can be. 1, introducing a new bill to enshrine the 000 custodian in law. 2, introducing real-time reporting of outages to ACMA and emergency services. 3, forcing telcos to test 000 during upgrades and maintenance. 4, new requirements on providers to fully ensure 000 calls fall back to other networks. 5, mandatory improvement plans after 000 outages. And 6, within 6 months of the commencement of the new laws, the custodian, through ACMA, will issue additional performance requirements to telcos to assure Australians of best practice. With respect to the end part of the Opposition Leader's question, our bipartisan new laws to delay access to social media are one of the most important things that our nation has ever done. Yeah. And they have the potential to change the world. And that is why these laws were being discussed at the United Nations. And that is why I was at the United Nations. The member would know if they had met with the bereaved families who have been lobbying for these laws for many years, people like Rob Evans, who was carrying his daughter Liv's ashes in an urn when he came to this place and begged us to act. They would know if they had spent time with Emma Mason, who lost her daughter Tilly to suicide. Emma is just an ordinary woman, but she has acted with incredible courage. Emma went to the United Nations to appeal to the world's leaders to take action, as we are taking action. And I do not regret, for 1 minute,
the member for Fisher will cease interjecting.
Standing with Emma as she took that mission to the world. So if we're going to talk apologies, the Leader of the Opposition should apologise for calling that work swanning around. That is what she said. I call on the Leader of the Opposition to apologise to those organisations and to the parents around the country seeking us to act.
Order. The member for Wright, we're going to have the manager of opposition business is just going to cease, and everyone is now going to listen to the member for Leichhardt with his question.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What does yesterday's historic signing of the Puk Puk Treaty mean between Papua New Guinea and Australia for our nation?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Leichhardt for his question. And of course, he represents an electorate where you can swim from Saibai Island to Papua New Guinea. That is how close we are.
Order.
Last year, when Prime Minister Marape and I walked the Kokoda track for Anzac Day, we reflected on our nation's shared bond. At the 50th anniversary of PNG independence last month, we reflected on our shared history. And yesterday, at the signing of the Puk Puk Treaty, we reflected on our shared future. Our bond, our history and our future. That is what this treaty is about. An alliance between two equal partners, between two old friends, furthering the interests of our nations and of our peoples, finding our security in the Pacific from within the Pacific family. And for Australia, family means Papua New Guinea. This is indeed a historic moment. The Puk Puk Treaty is only our third alliance and our first in over 7 decades. Our nearest neighbour, now our newest ally. An alliance born of respect, an alliance to meet common dangers, to act in our mutual interests and to safeguard each other's sovereignty. Two houses with one fence, as Prime Minister Marape has said. Two neighbours, partners, mates and now allies. I cannot comprehend the possibility of anything as significant as this for the defence of Australia as well as the sovereignty and defence of Papua New Guinea. Just over 50 years ago, of course, PNG, during our darkest hour, during World War II and through that period, was of course considered to be part of Australian territory. What this alliance does is up this relationship to a new level. Following the request of Papua New Guinea through Prime Minister Marape, accepted by my government, and I'm sure will be welcomed by both of our peoples.
Call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. After the catastrophic 000 outage last month, the Minister told a press conference before her trip to New York that, quote, there had been deaths. Exactly how many deaths is the Minister aware of, and has the Minister personally phoned each family to apologise for the Albanese Labor government's inaction?
Give the call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for her question. I trust she was watching when the Optus CEO announced news that there had been, as far as he was aware, 3 deaths. That was late Friday afternoon. The following day, on Saturday afternoon, the Premier, Roger Cook, said that they had found within the ambulance services of WA a 4th death that may be connected to the catastrophic Optus outages. And let us agree here, that is not good enough. What happened in September was not good enough. And legislating a 000 custodian will drive real change. But for us here, there is no silver bullet when it comes to corporate failures. So, have I spoken with the families? I have spoken with Optus, the company who has failed Australians and these families here. The CEO of Optus has apologised to the families for the failures of Optus and the catastrophic impact that has had on their families, as has the CEO of Singtel, the parent company of Optus. I think we can all agree it is right and appropriate for these companies to apologise because they are the cause of these catastrophic failures. They have accepted responsibility for this.
The Leader of the Opposition has asked a question.
And frankly, I am disappointed that the Leader of the Opposition seeks to let Optus off the hook and try to say that other people should apologise for the failures of a private company in Optus. This outage and the many failings of Optus are the fault of Optus alone, and I think the political actions, the politicising of a catastrophe here is letting Optus off the hook, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Mr. Speaker, this is a tragic circumstance. There are families who have lost the ones they love, and that hardens my resolve. Optus is accountable, and as the Minister, I will hold them to account. The independent regulator has an investigation on foot. We will await her recommendations, and Optus, I promise you, will face serious consequences for what they have done.
Call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. What is the importance of the Defence Treaty between Australia and Papua New Guinea, and what impact will this have on our Australian Defence Force?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for his question and acknowledge his service. Yesterday, our Prime Minister and James Marape, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, signed the Puk Puk Treaty, Article 4 of which contains a mutual defence obligation, giving it the character of an alliance, the first alliance into which our country has entered since the 1st of September 1951, when Australia signed the ANZUS Treaty 74 years ago. This means that PNG is now our third ally, along with the United States and with New Zealand. This is deeply historic, but it's also perfectly natural, because it is unthinkable that any Australian government today or in the future would regard an attack on Papua New Guinea as somehow not engaging our national interest. And indeed, on the one occasion where this has occurred in our past, we were most definitely there. Kokoda Track during the Second World War is deeply etched into our military history, and it, along with the battles of Milne Bay, Gona, Boona and so many other places, saw more than 6,500 Australian personnel make the ultimate sacrifice in the defence of that territory. And at each and every moment, Papua New Guineans stood shoulder to shoulder with Australian soldiers, emblematic of the relationship between our two peoples then and our two countries today. From PNG's point of view, this represents an unambiguous choice to see Australia as its natural security partner, a choice that we do not take for granted. And this alliance will now further the process of the integration between our two defence forces, which will include the recruitment of Papua New Guineans directly into the ADF, the first step of which will see permanent PNG residents in Australia be able to join our Defence Force from the 1st of January next year. Now, this agreement has been negotiated in record time, underpinned by a shared and significant ambition. And I really want to thank James Marape, the Deputy Prime Minister John Rosso, my counterpart, the Defence Minister Billy Joseph, along with our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister, our Minister for Pacific Island Affairs, and the countless officials in both Port Moresby and Canberra who have brought this treaty to fruition. The result is an alliance which will see both Papua New Guinea and Australia be fundamentally safer.
I call the member for Calare. I'll just do some quick acknowledgements. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today are representatives and leaders of the Zagawau Union in Australia, a guest of the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, and also the Right Honourable the Lord Herbert of South Downs, Member of the House of Lords of the United Kingdom. Welcome to you all. Give the call to the Honourable Member for Calare.
To the Health Minister. The rural doctor shortage crisis is a disgrace and a shameful indictment. The Charles Sturt University School of Rural Medicine in the central west of New South Wales is training doctors in the bush for practice in the bush, but for half a decade has been restricted by the government to only 37 Commonwealth-supported student places each year. This isn't good enough. When will your government deliver more medical student places to Charles Sturt University so it can train more country doctors that are so desperately needed?
Call to the Minister for Health and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for Calare for his question and for his persistent advocacy around improving healthcare services, not just in his community but in rural Australia more broadly. I'll come to the question of CSPs because I think he's aware that there is a tender open right now, but can I refer to the College of GPs Health of the Nation report this morning, an annual report that the College has delivered now for 9 years, I think, since the former government got rid of the Beach data set that used to track activity in general practice. It's an important contribution. And one of the highlights of this morning's report was to say that for the first time in many years, the number of GPs in a full-time equivalent sense has started to increase again. And that is a good thing for the country. It reflects determined work to make general practice more attractive for junior doctors as they consider their future career after finishing medical school. But the member does highlight the fact that there has been limited growth in medical school training places for many years now, often because of pretty determined opposition from the medical community itself, including the AMA, over the years. Over the last several years, this government has added a number of new medical schools, or is in the process of adding new medical schools, particularly outside of our major cities. James Cook University in far north Queensland, Darwin for the first time will have its own medical school. A number of other places have been added over the last several years as well. There are currently, I think, 100 Commonwealth-supported places for medical schools open for tender. And Charles Sturt University and other universities are able to apply for that. Obviously, it is a competitive process and that will be conducted at arm's length from myself and from the Education Minister. We have asked in the tender, as I understand it, for universities to indicate a particular focus on general practice, because although we want to see doctors more broadly come into the system, we are prioritising an increase in general practice above all things else, because we know that a well-functioning general practice scheme is utterly central to a well-functioning healthcare system. So I welcome the question. Obviously, I can't comment on the tender, which is open right now, but more doctors, more bulk billing, more urgent care and even cheaper medicines are the 4 key pillars of our strengthening Medicare agenda.
Call to the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs. How will the historic agreement between Australia and Papua New Guinea contribute to building a peaceful, stable and prosperous region?
Give a call to the Minister for Defence Industry and the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and strong interest in foreign policy. Last month, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and I travelled to Papua New Guinea to commemorate the 50th anniversary of PNG's independence. We celebrated our shared history, values and our enduring bonds. And our relationship with PNG is special. We've achieved so much together in recent years, from our bilateral security agreement to the PNG National Rugby League team. And yesterday, the 2 Prime Ministers signed the Puk Puk Treaty, establishing Australia's 3rd ever alliance and the first one in 74 years, and PNG's first ever. As the Prime Minister said, 4 kilometres separates our 2 nations. And as Prime Minister Marape said, in this very chamber, we are joined at the hip. We shed blood together on the Kokoda track and are buried together at the Bamana War Cemetery, including Pato Topipin from the Papuan Infantry Battalion, who was only 16 years of age when he made the ultimate sacrifice to preserve our freedom. So when PNG proposed this alliance, Australia was honoured to agree. As allies, in the event of an armed attack on either of our countries, we would both act to meet the danger. It is an agreement founded on friendship between our 2 peoples. It shapes the future of our relationship, as the PM said, as neighbours, equals, family and now allies. Speaker, the government is working hard to respond to Pacific priorities and ensure that we are the partner of choice. We turn up, listen and act on the priorities of the Pacific family. The Prime Minister walked the Kokoda track with PM Marape, the first 2 leaders of our nations to do so. PM Albanese was also the first foreign leader to address the PNG Parliament, and PM Marape was the first Pacific leader to address ours. Senior ministers from our government are regular visitors to the Pacific, and we're using every tool of statecraft, from defence and policing cooperation, trade, development assistance, temporary labour schemes, permanent migration and sport to deepen our relationships. Turning up, listening and acting, that's what we do, because our prosperity and stability is dependent upon the prosperity and stability of the Pacific. We've signed landmark treaties with Tuvalu and Nauru. The Nauru-Australia Treaty responds to their top concerns of economic resilience and banking services. Importantly, we're acting on climate change, the Pacific's top priority, and our landmark Whale-Pili Union does that. And we're negotiating with Fiji and Vanuatu as well. So our approach of listening, respect and action has delivered genuine and enduring partnerships. And Speaker, today, Australians and Papua New Guineans are safer due to this new alliance.
Call to the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. It has been 565 days since the Bean Review made 18 critical recommendations to government to fix the 000 network after the first Optus outage. 18 months on, with a 000 crisis and sadly deaths, why hasn't the government implemented all the recommendations, and will the Minister apologise for the government's delay in acting on these vital recommendations?
To the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the Shadow Minister for Communications for her questions, and I invite her to read the Bean Review, which has 18 recommendations, 13 of which are now complete, and 5 which are still in implementation. Now, of those 5, recommendations 3 and 4 pertain to new industry codes in testing of both devices and of networks. Recommendations 14 is around temporary outage roaming during natural disasters. Recommendation 15 is a mutual assistance memorandum of understanding to acquire mutual assistance between telcos during outages. I make these points because the common thread, Mr Speaker, is that in each of those 4 recommendations they are either being led or depend on industry. So, at my meeting with the chief executives of the 3 telcos who I summoned to Canberra earlier today ahead of introducing the 000 custodian legislation, I urged industry to go faster on those remaining 4 recommendations that they have carriage of, and I'm pleased to update the House, Mr Speaker, that they agreed to do so. One of the good things about this new law is that it creates new levers for the custodian to press industry when they are recalcitrant to get on with improvement. That is an improvement that would be delivered by the passage of the legislation, which is why, Mr Speaker, I was very disturbed to hear on Sky News just before question time, after the introduction of legislation for which the Shadow Minister for Communications was in the House to listen to, that she dithered and equivocated on whether the opposition would support the 000 custodian bill. This is the Shadow Minister who is on record criticising me for not going faster when presented with the opportunity to support the bill, dithered and equivocated over whether the opposition would support it. Our role here is to build confidence in the 000 system. I have been working fast as I can to bring this legislation to this place. The question in the legislation, Mr Speaker, is very simple, and it should not be difficult for the opposition to answer. The question is, do you support a stronger custodian for 000? And if the answer is yes, and if you want to be useful, then stop politicising this crisis and support the bill.
Order. The member for Page is now warned. Make a note of that. It's far too much noise. We'll hear from the member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government making it easier for first home buyers to buy their first home? What has been the response?
Call to the Minister. Give a call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and I really want to thank the member for Bean for his question. He's a really big advocate for us building more homes around the country, and he often talks to me about the really significant housing challenges that are facing his Canberra community. Speaker, he's got constituents that are working hard, They're doing everything right, and yet still they cannot afford to buy a home in our great country. Now, Speaker, it is too hard to build a home in our country and it is too hard to buy a home in our country, and that is because we have a housing system that's been in desperate need of reform for 40 years. Speaker, our government is turning that moment of national challenge into a moment of national change. And just in the last 2 weeks, you've seen our government deliver on a couple of really important
The Minister will
commitments.
pause. The member for Page, about a minute and a half ago, was warned, has ignored that, has interjected, so you'll leave the chamber under 94A. And I just said there's far too much noise, so there's consequences for actions. Someone's warned and they interject, you go straight away. Minister in continuation.
Thank you so much, Speaker. You would have seen about a week ago, Speaker, that the Prime Minister and I were together implementing a really important change for the young people of this country. As of the 1st of October, every single first-home buyer around this country will be eligible to get into the housing market with just a 5% deposit and our government support. Now, Speaker, there's no income limits, there's no limits on places, and for the first time we've got house price caps that actually reflect the cost of housing where people want to live. Now, Speaker, in Sydney today we see a young couple that will save on average around 11 years to get into the property market. The change that we are making today not only saves them tens of thousands of dollars in lenders' mortgage insurance, it saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent that they would be able to that they don't have to pay, and it takes that 11-year time frame back to 2 or 3 for people around the country. Now, Speaker, this is really meaningful support for a generation of people in this country who need and deserve our help, and they need it right now. Now, Speaker, of course, the solution to our national housing challenge is to build more homes, and that's why the majority of Labor's visionary $43 billion investment is in doing just that, and we're making really good progress. Speaker, we've got housing starts in our country up 17% on where they were a year ago. Now, our government's talked about clearing the backlog of housing applications that are under federal environmental approvals. And, Speaker, I can let the House know that we are now processing new housing environmental approvals at about 3 times the rate that we were a year ago. Now, Speaker, this builds on really important work that we did in our first term. Remember, 180,000 Australians into their first home while we've been in government, 1 million households supported with an almost 50% increase to Commonwealth rent assistance. More than 500,000 homes have been built since we came to office, and we've got 25,000 social and affordable homes in planning or construction, and a quick refresher, they built 373 in almost a decade in office. Speaker, we're building more homes, we're getting renters a better deal, and yes, we are getting more Australians into home ownership.
Still member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Minister, I note that just today you are urging Optus to go faster 3 weeks after the devastating outage where lives were lost. Minister, why did people have to die before you instructed your department to accelerate the implementation of 000 Guardian legislation as recommended by an independent review to your government over 18 months ago?
Give a call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for the Arts. For Sport.
I thank the Shadow Minister for her question. The only thing that could have stopped Optus from having this outage was Optus themselves. They are responsible for their failure and they will be held to account for their failure. However, Mr Speaker, the 000 custodian would not exist at all were it not for our government. We commissioned the Bean Review. We accepted all of its recommendations, including the work to design and implement the custodian. It is a complete fabrication, Mr Speaker, to say that the government has sat on this, a complete fabrication. In March 2024, the Bean Review recommended a 000 custodian and that further work be done on the specific nature of the custodian. It did not recommend a particular model. If you read the Bean Review, which again I encourage, it says this may be done in a number of ways. So in April 24, the government tasked the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman to lead a steering committee of industry, government and consumer representatives to do that work. They met 6 times between May and October 2024, providing their final report to the department on the 28th of November 2024. The department considered all of the recommendations and all of the issues identified by that committee, which informed its recommendations to the then Minister in March 2025 that the custodian should operate within the department and be supported by new legislative powers. Upon accepting the department's recommendation, that custodian commenced immediately and work began on the legislation that we are introducing now. So, the Albanese government has and will always work to protect Australians, and we will hold those who fail to deliver on their obligations to full account.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What did the final budget outcome for the last financial year show about the progress the Albanese Labor government has made on the budget over the 3 years after a decade of budget mismanagement?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I knew that the mighty Broncos were a chance on Sunday when the member for Hunter confidently tipped the Melbourne Storm, Mr Speaker. I thank him for that, and I thank him for the question, because responsible economic management is a defining feature of this Labor government, and you can see that in the final budget outcome which was released just last week. In dollar terms, our government has presided over the biggest ever positive improvement in the budget in a single parliamentary term. In just 3 years, we've overseen a $209 billion improvement in the budget bottom line. We turned 2 very big Liberal deficits into 2 substantial Labor surpluses in our first 2 years, and in our third year we've substantially reduced the deficit as well, so that it's now a fifth of what we inherited from those opposite, around a third of what we forecast before the election. As a consequence of that, debt is now $188 billion lower in the year just finished than what we inherited from those opposite, and that means we are paying something like $60 billion less interest over the course of the next decade or so. Now, we've achieved this outcome because we've found savings, we've shown restraint, we've banked revisions to revenue, we've kept unemployment low, and we've got real wages growing again in our economy. And as a result of our approach and our policy, international ratings agency Standard & Poor's just last week reaffirmed Australia's AAA credit rating. Now, Labor's responsible economic management is in stark contrast to the mess that we inherited from those opposite. They promised to deliver a surplus every single year and only delivered 9 straight deficits. They doubled debt before COVID. They had debt ratcheting up, and they're on track to exceed $1 trillion not too long after the 2022 election. They spent most of the revenue upgrades. They had no savings in their last budget. And I think most damningly, Mr Speaker, they took to the last election a policy of higher taxes, lower wages, bigger deficits and more debt, Mr Speaker. And we've spent 3 years cleaning up the mess that we inherited from them. Now, this government is guided by the national economic interest as we go about making the budget more sustainable. Those opposite are guided by the internal politics of the Liberal Party. And whoever prevails in that unedifying spat between the far right and the even further right on that side of the House, it's already clear. They haven't changed a bit, Mr Speaker. They haven't learned a thing. If anything, they are more divisive and more divided than ever, and they still have no economic credibility whatsoever. Their record in government and now their record in opposition makes that clear.
Call to the honourable member for Lyne.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. How many 000 outages have occurred since you became the Minister responsible for communications?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for her question. I also encourage her to read the Bean Review, because if you did, you would read the disturbing fact that until our government acted, Australian telcos were not legally required to report outages. Not required at all. That's what happened under your side of the fence.
Order.
We have already put in place changes which will be further strengthened on 1st of November when the new ACMA determination commissioned by my predecessor takes effect. It'll mean telcos must immediately share information relating to outages with relevant emergency service organisations such as police, fire and ambulance.
Order. Order. The Manager of Opposition Business. The House comes to order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government acting on climate change? What other policy proposals on climate and energy are being investigated?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. And indeed, it's been a while since Parliament sat, and there has been a lot of action by the government and by Australian households when it comes to climate change and energy, and in particular in relation to households, Mr Speaker. It's been a while since I've been able to update the House, and I'm pleased to tell the House that now 78,124 Australian households have put in a cheaper home battery under the Albanese government's policy, Mr Speaker. 78,124. And this is part of a trend, Mr Speaker. I'm also pleased to inform the House of recent figures which show that last month was the first month in Australian history where more energy in the main grid came from renewables than coal. We see that as a good step forward. Those opposite are probably upset about it, Mr Speaker. And of course, this is all encouraging and in building momentum for the emissions reductions target of 62 to 70, which this government laid out during the parliamentary break, Mr Speaker. Now, this is the government getting on with it and the Australian people getting on with it, because that's what the Australian people told us to do on May the 3rd. The Australian people told us on May the 3rd to keep going with plans for cheaper renewable energy. Now, some would think that maybe they also sent a message to those opposite. But those opposite seem to get the message to keep going as well, Mr Speaker. I'm asked what policies are under investigation. Now, the opposition went to the last election with a nuclear policy, which the Australian people did cast judgment on. Might come as a surprise to the member for New England, and it might come as a surprise that it didn't go well, considering the quality of the campaign. The member for Fairfax travelled the world talking about nuclear energy, and he put videos out about that. My personal favourite was what we can learn from Hiroshima, Mr Speaker, when it came to him selling nuclear energy. But the current Shadow Minister continues in the same vein. He spent the last couple of weeks in the United States. Good on him, fair enough. He put up an 8-minute video on YouTube about his trip, Mr Speaker. I watched it so that you don't have to. You're welcome. And having watched that video, we can tell some things. He did not visit any small modular reactors, advanced modular reactors or micro reactors, perhaps due to the small technical detail that none exist, Mr Speaker. There were none to see, but he did go to the National Laboratory in Idaho. What his video didn't tell us is that that was the site for the NuScale small modular reactor, which was cancelled last year because it was so expensive and because no one would buy the power from it because the power was so expensive. That was the small modular reactor that the member for Fairfax had as the image on his website. It's time to talk nuclear, Mr Speaker. There is no nuclear renaissance. There is just a renaissance of silly ideas from the opposition.
For the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Multiple inquiries into 000 outages recommend temporary disaster roaming during natural disasters and outages. This would keep Australians connected during emergencies, no matter who their providers are. Minister, the bushfire season is fast approaching. In your previous answer, you said that telcos have agreed to go faster on this outstanding reform from the Bean Review. Will you give the telcos a deadline to implement disaster roaming?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Indi for her question, and I acknowledge her ongoing interest and passion for improving regional telecommunications. The government accepted, absolutely, and agreed in principle with recommendation 14 of the Bean Review, which recommended that work currently being undertaken on roaming during natural disasters should be followed by work on temporary roaming during outages caused by other events, though acknowledged the industry had identified some technical feasibility issues. I'm advised that the industry is developing a temporary disaster roaming capability. It's drafting a memorandum of understanding to support this development. And let me be clear, it is my expectation that industry will make that work. Subject to the outcomes of that work, my department will examine the extent to which roaming could be available during other outage events, as recommended in the Bean Review. I would also highlight the government's commitment to the Universal Outdoor Mobile Obligation, which will enable for the first time baseline outdoor mobile connectivity across Australia, and this will provide another level of redundancy during outages of all kinds. And with respect to the second half of your question, I will say that was absolutely the subject of much of the discussion of the Minister for Emergency Management and myself when we met with the 3 CEOs of the telcos in my office earlier today. We also asked NEMA to attend, and NEMA and the Minister for Emergency Management spoke to the particular perils of the natural disaster season, the particular matters that were outstanding, and we all committed to get back together again and to do a simulation drill in a couple of weeks to stress test where this system is not currently working for people, particularly in places like regional Australia. You would know, of course, the Minister for Emergency Management is always thinking front of mind about regional Australians, and I reassure you that we are sincere in that work and that work will continue.
Call to the member for Patterson.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. How will the free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates expand opportunities for our farmers and producers? How do regional communities benefit from this improvement to Australia's standing and our trade relationships?
Give a call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for Patterson for her ongoing interest in agriculture and producers in her local electorate. She's also, of course, been chair of the Primary Industries Committee of the House and done some excellent work in regards to a food security strategy. But since coming to government, Mr Speaker, we have worked very hard to diversify our trade and unlock opportunities for our farmers and our producers, because we know that better market access is good for our farmers, but it's also great for our regional communities and it's good for regional jobs, Mr Speaker, something our farmers and producers, particularly in the member for Patterson's electorate, will know well. We've restored Australia's place in the world. In a careful and considered way we've gone about this, and in just the last week, during the Prime Minister's visit to the United Arab Emirates, we brought Australia's new free trade agreement with the UAE into force. The Australia-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership eliminates tariffs on more than 99% of Australia's agricultural exports. Most tariffs on agricultural products sent to the UAE were eliminated immediately, Mr Speaker, including on red meat, on grains, on oilseeds and on dairy, something we know that farmers in regional communities will benefit from. And on tariffs on a limited number of goods, such as poultry, bread and pastry, will be phased out over the next 3 to 5 years, Mr Speaker. This deal delivers real and tangible benefits for Australian farmers and producers and gives them unprecedented access and preferential treatment when they do business with the UAE. It will slash around $50 million a year in tariffs based on current volumes for Australian agriculture and food exports, keeping more money in our regional economies and supporting more regional jobs. And importantly, it allows for growth into the UAE for our farmers. With our agriculture, fisheries and forestry exports to the UAE, currently valued at $1.7 billion in the last financial year, including from our oilseeds, our red meat, our grains and our dairy exports, the UAE is now our 12th largest agricultural export market. And this is a deal that will support more growth opportunities, as I've said, for our farmers and our producers. Importantly, this is our first free trade agreement with the Middle East. This is work that took a Labor government to deliver in the careful, considered way we go about our business, because we know that that's what you achieve when you work hard on your trading relationships, and we know the benefits for our farmers and our regional communities of this. We know, of course, that those opposite neglected some important trading partners and relationships, and we have worked night and day and hard to actually improve and get the re-entry of $20 billion worth of trade with our largest trading partner, Mr Speaker. I want to be clear, we have delivered now 231 market access achievements and we've 29 new markets.
Concluded. The call to the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Can the Minister confirm to the House that neither she nor her office were notified of the catastrophic 000 outage that occurred on the 18th of September before the afternoon of the 19th of September?
Call to the Minister for Communications, the Minister for Sport.
Yes, I can confirm that we were not notified of the catastrophic outage until late afternoon on Friday the 19th September.
Order. We'll hear from the member for Maribyrnong.
My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect by making it easier for Australians to access bulk billed GP visits?
Call to the Minister for Health and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Maribyrnong for her question. She is, as you know, Speaker, a qualified psychologist and adds her name to this long list of health professionals on this side of the House. We have nurses, we have doctors, we have psychologists, we have the first female pharmacist ever elected to the Parliament, just to name a few, Mr Speaker. And every single one of them and every single member of this side of the House campaigned hard at the last election on our promise to strengthen Medicare, to deliver more doctors, more bulk billing, more urgent care clinics and even cheaper medicines, Mr Speaker, and we're delivering all of those promises. Today's annual Health of the Nation report, as I said to the member for Clare in response to his question, confirms that for the first time in many years, not only is the headcount of GPs increasing in this country, but the more important measure of full-time equivalent GPs has increased in the last 12 months for the first time in years, Mr Speaker. And, Mr Speaker, more are coming. More are coming. Last year was a record year for the number of junior doctors training as GPs. This year broke that record, and I'm confident that next year we'll see a record again, Mr Speaker. And to the member's question, we're also delivering on our promise around bulk billing. Since we tripled the bulk billing incentive for concession card holders and children a little less than 2 years ago, Mr Speaker, there have been almost 1.9 million additional free visits to the GP in the member state of Victoria alone, Mr Speaker. The bulk billing rate for those 11 million Australians is now comfortably over 90% again, Mr Speaker. But we know that it's too low for those Australians who don't have a concession card. And that's why in around 3 weeks' time, for the first time ever, we will extend bulk billing support to every single Australian patient, and we'll pay a bonus incentive to those general practices who agree to bulk bill every single one of their patients, Mr Speaker. Now, last week the member and I visited the Moonee Ponds Super Clinic, one of 5 clinics operated by the Yarra Medical Group. Right now they're mixed billing practices. They charge a gap to all of their patients who don't have a concession card, Mr Speaker. But they told the member for Maribyrnong and me last week that from the 1st of November they will bulk bill at all 5 clinics every single patient that comes through their door, Mr Speaker, because they worked out it's not just better for their patients, it also works out better for their practice and for their individual doctors when they look at the record investment we're making, Mr Speaker. We're delivering more doctors, more bulk billing, more urgent care clinics and even cheaper medicines. That's what a government focused on delivery does.
Call to the honourable member for Kennedy.
Treasurer, we praise the Prime Minister for completion of the Great Inland Highway. But now, disaster. A closure of copper by Glencore and phosphate by Dyno Nobel. Simultaneously, government put bananas on the scaffold, accepting an import application from the Philippines, rife with disease and exploitive wage levels. The expiration of the $6 a unit gas agreement precipitated doomsday for copper and phosphate. Our competitors pay $6, Australia's $16.60. Treasurer, without reserved resource policy, won't your government preside over the obliteration of Australia's 4th biggest industrial centre, Mount Isa, and a goodbye to bananas?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I think at least 4 really important issues in the member for Kennedy's question. I'll try and touch on all of them. First of all, on bananas. I wanted to assure him that the government will not compromise on biosecurity when it comes to banana imports. On the 16th of September, the department advised it's undertaking a science and evidence-based assessment of a request from the Philippines. There's no predetermined outcome of that process. It's important to note that this notification doesn't signal that trade will commence or is imminent. As the Prime Minister, the Minister for Agriculture and other senior members of the government have said, we won't compromise on biosecurity, and our enviable biosecurity status is not up for negotiation. The second one was about our investment as a government in regional infrastructure, particularly in the member for Kennedy's part of the world in Queensland. We're very proud of that investment. Thank you for acknowledging it. Thirdly, when it comes to the gas market, I know that the Resources Minister and the Energy Minister are working very closely with the Cabinet on the various processes we have underway when it comes to the future of gas policy in our country. Mr Speaker, I was also asked about the very concerning developments in North Queensland and North West Queensland when it comes to the smelters, Mr Speaker. And I wanted to acknowledge from the outset that the workers, their families, the broader community, the local economy of that part of our country is front of mind. It is about 600 jobs at Mount Isa and Townsville. It is about 500 more at Dyno Nobel, Phosphate Hill, that would go if the smelter closes. But it's bigger than that. It's about the broader industrial capabilities of our country and that really important region, as the Prime Minister has said when he was asked about this recently. That's why Minister Ayres has been doing a heap of work with the Queensland Government and Glencore to try and find a solution here. I thank particularly Minister Ayres for the way that he's gone about that, working closely with the Queensland Government. Good progress has been made and more will be said about that before long by Minister Ayres, and I don't intend to preempt that. The government's approach is to do what we responsibly can to ensure that Australia is an export powerhouse for decades to come. The Mount Isa copper smelter is a nationally significant asset, a significant facility for regional Queensland's industrial capability, and that has driven our efforts right throughout this process. It's also what drives our Future Made in Australia agenda, making sure that our workers and businesses and regions are beneficiaries of all of this churn and change that we're seeing in the world. And that's why we're doing whatever we responsibly can to get a good outcome for the workers and families, communities and businesses that the member for Kennedy represents, and we hope to have more to say about that soon.
Call to the honourable member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for Australian workers and easing cost of living pressures?
Good call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Melbourne for her question and her fierce advocacy for Australian workers. Since the Albanese Labor government came to office, we have been working to get a better deal for Australian workers and to get wages moving. Of course, this was off the back of 10 long years of low wages as a deliberate design feature of the Coalition's economic architecture. Well, our government has improved our workplace laws to deliver better wages and more secure jobs, and now we're starting to see the benefit of our changes. Under the Albanese Labor government, we're currently seeing the strongest rate of annual real wage growth in 5 years. Growth in real wages helps workers with cost of living. Importantly, the government's workplace relations reforms have reinvigorated enterprise bargaining, with a record high of 2.8 million employees now covered by enterprise agreements. This is the highest number of employees covered by agreements since bargaining first began in 1991. Our government's workplace relations reforms have removed barriers to workplace bargaining, meaning better pay and job security for workers, while helping businesses improve flexibility, productivity and staff retention. The most recent data shows that enterprise agreements are delivering real wage increases. The most recent data shows that the average annualised wage increase for agreements improved in the June quarter was at 4.2%, higher than the economy-wide wage increase of 3.4%. In particular, enterprise agreements in the private sector led the growth in wages. Real wage increases delivered through enterprise bargaining are providing important cost of living relief for Aussie workers. In addition to enterprise bargaining, our government has a strong record of standing up for our lowest paid workers. In our government's most recent submission to the annual wage review, we called for a real wage increase, and from July 1 this year, minimum award wages have increased by 3.5%. Of course, over the term of this Labor government, minimum award wages have increased by $9,120 a year. This is real money in the pockets of our lowest paid workers. We have also, of course, legislated to protect penalty rates for those on the minimum award safety net who rely on them as an essential part of their pay packet. And of course, our government is delivering tax cuts for every single worker in this country. While those on the other side continue to be distracted and divided, it is this Labor government that is committed to helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they pay.
Call General Member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Minister, when exactly did the minister personally find out about the 000 outage on the 18th of September? And how was the minister personally advised of this outage?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the Shadow Minister for her question. The 000 outage from Optus occurred on the 18th of September, the Thursday. I was made aware by my office Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon, that there had been more than 600 calls impacted and 3 deaths.
Give the call to the member for Griffith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to help Australians with a student debt, and what other reforms is the government making to higher education?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And can I thank the member for Griffith for her question? She asked about student debt. This is an issue I know that's dear to her heart. There are 31,877 people in her electorate who have a student debt. I think that's almost the highest in the country. And so the promise that we made at the election to cut student debt by 20% means a lot to those 31,000 people in the electorate of Griffith. But more than that, the 3 million Australians right across the country. It was the first piece of legislation that we introduced and that we passed in this new parliament. The average student debt today is about $27,000. That means that when this cut takes place, it'll cut about $5,500 off that average student debt. But for those 31,000 people in Griffith, it's even more. The average student debt there is about $6,500. So that's a massive weight off their back. And I can advise the House that the Tax Office tells us that they will start to do this from next month.
Order.
The Tax Office will start cutting student debt from the second half of November, and it will continue in December. You won't have to do anything to get it. You'll simply get a text message from the ATO when it's done. And Mr Speaker, we're doing that. We're also rolling out paid pracs. This is, for the very first time, the Commonwealth Government providing financial support for teaching students, for nursing students, for midwifery students and for social work students. We promised it and we're delivering it. It's real cost of living help, real practical help with the practical part of your university degree. It started on the 1st of July and already more than 50,000 people have applied to get it. We also promised to double the number of university study hubs right across the country, in the bush, in the regions and for the very first time in the outer suburbs, bringing university closer to where people live. Again, Mr Speaker, we promised it and we're delivering it. I opened one in Strathpine in the member for Dixon's electorate in May. In June, I opened one in Ellenbrook in the northern suburbs of Perth. In July, a hub on King Island opened, a hub in Warwick. In the Leader of the National Party's electorate opened in August, one in Macquarie Fields, in Mount Druitt, in Broadmeadows. In September, one in Murrumba, and in the next few months more will open on Kangaroo Island, in Kununurra, in Sorell in Tassie and in Elizabeth in South Australia, and, Mr Speaker, also in the great suburb of Inala, a suburb I know that you know well, in the southwestern suburbs of Brisbane. So whether it's cutting student debt, whether it's paid prac or whether it's more university study hubs, we promised it and we're delivering it.
Call to the Prime Minister.
I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.